It was an ordinary day, one that began like any other. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft, golden glow across the quiet, rural road. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, their leaves whispering secrets only the wind could understand. Birds flew overhead, their wings cutting through the air, creating a symphony of peaceful chirps. All was still, as if the world itself was holding its breath, basking in the serenity of the afternoon. But in a moment, all that calm would be shattered by a single, deafening sound. A car came racing down the road, tires screeching against the gravel, the engine growling like an angry beast. It was speeding, too fast for a country road, too reckless for any place where life should feel safe. The sound of the car was harsh, almost violent, cutting through the peaceful ambience like a knife. As it approached, there was a sudden, inexplicable shift. The car's window rolled down, and in a split second, someone was tossed out. It happened so quickly that it felt like a nightmare unfolding before anyone could react. A small, fragile dog. His body crumpled as it hit the ground with a sickening thud. He landed awkwardly, his body twisted in a way that looked unnatural, painful. His fur, once beautiful, was matted with dirt, his body covered in bruises. The car didn't stop. The screeching tires faded into the distance, leaving the dog alone, abandoned, discarded as if he were nothing more than an unwanted object. The world seemed to freeze for a moment. For a few long seconds, there was only the faint rustle of the leaves and the sound of the wind, a stark contrast to the violence that had just occurred. The car was gone. The dog lay motionless. But then, just when it seemed like the story had already ended, a faint whimper broke through the silence. A small, weak cry, a sign that there was still life, still a flicker of hope. Slowly, painfully, the dog's eyes opened. They were full of confusion, of fear, and of something else, a small, undeniable spark of life. It was as if the dog was saying to the world, "I'm still here. I'm still fighting." The world seemed to take a breath, as if it too knew that this wasn't the end. This is where our story begins. A dog, thrown away from a speeding car, as if he were a forgotten piece of trash. A dog who, despite everything, despite the pain, the betrayal, and the fear, refused to stop fighting. This is the story of how one small animal, broken and discarded, chose to hold on. It's the story of a fight not just for survival, but for something greater. For the belief that no matter how broken you are, you can rise again. That no matter how abandoned you feel, there's always hope. But this story is not just about the dog. It's about kindness, about how one small act of mercy can change everything. It's about the people who see a creature suffering and decide to reach out, to do something, even when it feels impossible. And it's about the journey of healing, because true healing doesn't come easily. It's a battle. It's a process. It's painful, but it's worth it. Stay with me, because what happens next is not only a story of survival, but one of hope and redemption. If you believe in the power of kindness, in the strength that comes from never giving up, stay with me until the end of this story. This is a tale of courage, of love, and of a dog who refused to let life break him. But first, I want you to ask yourself, how far would you go for something that was thrown away? If you saw a creature who had been discarded, beaten down by the world, what would you do? Would you turn away, or would you reach out and offer a hand? What would it take for you to step forward, knowing that it might not be easy, knowing that you might be hurt in the process? You see, the world isn't always kind. Sometimes it's cruel. Sometimes it leaves us feeling discarded, forgotten, as if we don't matter. But every once in a while, something happens that reminds us that kindness still exists, that there is still light in the darkest of places. And in this story, that kindness is what makes all the difference. As you continue to follow this story, I want you to think about what it means to fight for someone or something, even when it seems hopeless. I want you to think about the moments when you were broken, when you thought you couldn't go on. And I want you to remember that in those moments, there is always a choice, to give up or to keep fighting. But sometimes, the best stories are the ones where we refuse to give up, even when it feels like the world is against us. This is that kind of story. A story where love and determination are stronger than fear. A story that proves that no matter how far you fall, there's always a way to rise again. So, let me ask you again, If you had found this dog, would you have stopped to help? Or would you have walked away, thinking that there was nothing that could be done? Would you have believed that something so broken could ever heal? Stay with me as we dive deeper into the journey of this dog, his pain, his struggle, and his relentless determination to survive. This is where hope begins. This is where the fight starts. The first few days after Sarah found the dog were filled with a whirlwind of emotions, thoughts, and decisions. She had rushed him to the vet, desperate to make sure he was going to survive. His body was broken in more ways than one, physically, emotionally, and mentally. The trauma of being thrown from a moving car, the abandonment, the isolation, those wounds were invisible, but just as damaging. Sarah couldn't understand it. How could anyone be so cruel? How could someone throw away a living, breathing creature like that? It was unfathomable. And yet, here he was, alive. Against all odds, he was still here, and he was fighting. The first night in her home was awkward. She had set up a small bed for him next to hers, but he didn't move from the corner. He barely ate. When she tried to approach him, he would flinch, his body rigid with fear. He was wary, unsure whether she would hurt him, too. Max, Sarah's own dog, had been the first to approach the injured animal. His demeanor was gentle, as if he instinctively understood the gravity of the situation. Max, ever the playful and exuberant companion, was subdued, his tail low as he lay next to the injured dog. He didn't try to play. He simply stayed with him, offering the quiet comfort of companionship. Sarah sat down beside the two dogs, her hand resting gently on the injured animal's back. She didn't know what to do, how to make him feel safe again. She simply sat in silence, giving him the space he needed. She didn't force him to do anything. She just let him know that he wasn't alone. And slowly, day by day, the dog began to trust her. It was small things at first, a soft glance, a wag of his tail, a tentative lick to her hand. But it was enough. It was a sign. It was hope. It had been a week since Sarah found him on the side of the road, an Apollo. She had decided to call him that, after the Greek god of healing and the sun, was still healing, still recovering from the physical wounds that had been inflicted upon him. But the wounds that ran deeper, the ones that couldn't be seen, were harder to heal. There were moments when Sarah would catch him staring out the window, his eyes distant, as if searching for something. She wondered what he was thinking. Was he remembering the car that had thrown him away? Was he afraid that it would happen again? The trauma was not easily forgotten. But Sarah was determined to show him that he was safe now, that he had a home, that he mattered. One evening, as the sky turned pink with the setting sun, Sarah noticed that Apollo was limping. He hadn't been able to walk properly at first, but now he was trying to stand, his legs still a little stiff but stronger than before. His ribs, once so fragile and painful, were healing, and with each passing day, he looked less like a broken creature and more like a dog with a future. She smiled to herself as she watched him. He was a fighter, that was for sure, a survivor. But what amazed her the most was the resilience in his eyes. It was as if he had decided that no matter what had happened in the past, he wasn't going to let it define his future. And that was something Sarah admired deeply. She had always thought of herself as strong, but she began to see in Apollo something even more powerful, a will to live, a refusal to be broken, no matter how the world tried to hurt him. He had been discarded like trash, thrown out without a second thought, but he was still here, and he was going to keep fighting. Apollo's recovery wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt. There were nights when he would cry out in pain, moments when Sarah wasn't sure if she was doing the right thing, if he was ever going to be okay. She had to learn to balance between pushing him to heal and giving him the space to grieve. He wasn't just recovering physically, he was rebuilding trust in the world around him, and that was going to take time. But Apollo never stopped fighting. Even on the days when he struggled to move, when his body seemed too tired, when his eyes were filled with confusion, he kept going. There was something in his spirit that refused to back down. Sarah watched him, awe and admiration filling her heart. One day, as Sarah sat on the porch, her legs crossed beneath her, she noticed a change in Apollo. He was looking at her with a newfound focus, his eyes locked on hers. He wasn't just sitting in the corner anymore. He was standing, trembling slightly, but standing nonetheless. Without thinking, Sarah stood up. "Come on, "Apollo," she whispered gently. She held out her hand, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, there was hesitation, a flicker of uncertainty in Apollo's eyes. But then, slowly, he took a step forward. And then another. His movements were stiff, his legs weak. But with each step, it became clear that this wasn't just a physical recovery. It was an emotional one too. He was trusting again. He was choosing to believe that it was safe to move forward. By the time Sarah had walked him to the end of the yard, Apollo was walking on his own, his head held high. He wasn't limping anymore. His gait wasn't perfect, but it was a triumph nonetheless. The little dog who had once been thrown away like trash was now standing tall, taking each step with purpose. But it wasn't just about the physical recovery. Sarah soon realized that there was more work to be done. Apollo had learned to trust her, but his fear of the world remained. There were moments when he would freeze in place at the sound of a passing car, his body rigid with terror, his eyes wide with panic. He had been thrown out of one, and now every car seemed like a threat. At first, Sarah wasn't sure how to help him through it. She tried to be patient, to comfort him when the fear took hold, but she didn't know how to make him forget the trauma. And then, one day, it hit her. What if he wasn't supposed to forget? What if the goal wasn't to erase the past, but to learn to live with it, to overcome it? What if Apollo didn't need to forget the fear, but to learn that he was safe now? That he was no longer a victim, but a survivor? She decided to take him on small walks around the neighborhood, by the park. She made sure there were no cars passing by, no other distractions. At first, Apollo was hesitant. His eyes darted around, every sound seeming to put him on edge. But with each walk, his confidence grew. Slowly, he began to understand that he wasn't in danger, that the world wasn't going to hurt him anymore. It wasn't a quick fix, and there were days when the fear would resurface. But with Sarah's help, Apollo was learning to trust again. He was learning that not all cars meant pain. Not all humans meant harm. And slowly, bit by bit, the trauma started to fade, replaced by something stronger. Something that couldn't be broken. Hope. Apollo had come a long way from the dog that had been tossed from a car. He wasn't the same animal anymore, not just physically, but emotionally. He had learned to trust again. He had learned that love could heal wounds. And he had learned that no matter what the world threw his way, he could rise again. The days continued to pass, and with each one, Apollo became stronger. His once pained eyes now sparkled with life, and his steps, though still careful, were no longer slow and uncertain. He was learning to run again, to feel the earth beneath his paws with the joy of a dog who had nothing but the open sky ahead of him. But Sarah knew that even though his body was healing, the final part of the journey, the real challenge, was in his heart. The wounds from the past couldn't be undone. They were there, lingering just beneath the surface. They couldn't be erased, no matter how much Sarah wanted to. But what she could do was help him find peace with them, help him understand that the world was not as cruel as it once seemed. She could show him that he was worthy of love, and that the pain of the past didn't define him. Apollo's progress was slow, but steady. He began to play with Max again, chasing after sticks, his tail wagging in excitement as he ran beside his new brother. Sarah couldn't help but smile at the sight. There was something beautiful about seeing a dog who had once been so broken find joy in the simplest of things again. And yet, despite all the strides he had made, there were still moments when the fear would come back. One afternoon, as Sarah and Apollo took a walk through the park, a car passed by, its engine growling as it sped down the road. In an instant, Apollo froze. His body tensed, his tail tucked between his legs, his eyes wide with terror. Sarah felt a rush of panic in her chest. She had seen this before, the fear, the uncertainty, but it still hurt every time. She crouched down beside him, her voice gentle, soothing. "It's okay, Apollo. You're safe now. I'm right here." For a moment, there was no response. Apollo stood frozen in place, his body trembling with the old, familiar fear. Sarah's heart ached as she gently stroked his back, reminding him that he wasn't alone. She knew the road to healing wasn't linear. It would take time, and there would always be setbacks. But then, just when it seemed like the fear would consume him, Apollo looked up at her. His eyes were still wide, but there was something different about them. Something stronger. His ears perked up, And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he took a step forward. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she watched him, amazed by his strength. He wasn't running away this time. He was standing his ground, facing the fear head-on. In that moment, Apollo made a choice that would change everything. He didn't have to forget the past. He didn't have to erase the fear that haunted him. But he could choose to keep going anyway. He could choose to keep walking forward, no matter how hard it might be. And that, Sarah realized, was the true power of healing. Together, they walked. Slowly at first, but steadily, Apollo took each step, his body still tense but his resolve growing stronger with every movement. Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of pride wash over her. She knew this moment would mark a turning point, not just for Apollo, but for their journey together. He had overcome so much. Now, he was ready to face the future, not with fear, but with strength. A few weeks later, Apollo's progress had reached a point where it was impossible to deny the transformation. His once fragile body was now strong and healthy, his muscles toned from his daily walks and play. His fur shone in the sunlight, his eyes radiated warmth, and his spirit was finally free. One afternoon, Sarah took Apollo to the local shelter. There was a dog there, an older one, just as broken as Apollo had been. This dog had been abandoned, neglected for years, and was now in need of a new home. Sarah could see it in his eyes, the same fear, the same pain that had once been in Apollo's. And so, she decided to take him home. It was a simple decision, but it was a profound one. Sarah knew that Apollo had been given a second chance at life, and now, it was time to pay that gift forward. She was not just giving this dog a home, she was giving him the same love, the same patience, and the same hope that had been given to Apollo. It was a cycle, one that had no end, as long as there were people willing to help, willing to care. As Apollo welcomed the new dog into their home, Sarah stood back and watched, her heart full. She saw something in Apollo's eyes, a quiet understanding. He knew what it was like to be broken. He knew what it was like to be thrown away. And now, he was giving that dog the same chance he had been given. He was showing him the same compassion, the same willingness to trust again. It was a beautiful moment, but it was more than just a happy ending. It was a reminder that healing doesn't just come from one person's actions. It's a ripple effect, spreading out into the world, one act of kindness at a time. And every time someone chose to be kind, to be compassionate, they were making the world a little bit better. That evening, as Sarah sat with both dogs curled up beside her, she reflected on everything that had happened. It had been a long road, full of challenges, heartbreak, and setbacks. But it had also been filled with moments of love, growth, and transformation. Apollo had not only healed himself, he had helped her heal too. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt at peace. She knew that she had done everything she could for Apollo. And in return, he had taught her the true meaning of resilience. He had shown her that no matter how broken you are, you can rise again. That the past does not define you. That there is always hope, even in the darkest of times. As the night wore on, Apollo curled up at Sarah's feet, his body warm and content. He had come so far, from the broken dog that had been discarded on the side of the road to the strong, happy companion he was now. His journey was far from over, but it was no longer a journey of survival. It was a journey of love, of healing, and of new beginnings. And Sarah knew that she would be there every step of the way, just as she had been from the beginning. Together, they had learned that no matter how much pain you've experienced, no matter how much fear you carry, there is always a way to find peace. There is always a way to heal. It was a story of hope, a story that would never end. And as she looked down at Apollo, she whispered softly, "You did it, buddy. You found your way home." If you have ever witnessed or experienced something like this, share your story below. Your words can inspire someone today. Let's continue to spread kindness and hope, one story at a time. And if you believe in the power of second chances, subscribe to our community, where stories like this are told every day. Together, we can make the world a better place. This is the end of Apollo's story, but it's just the beginning of many more journeys like his. Thank you for being a part of it.